All right, Corey, the recording has started, so why don't you go ahead and introduce your panel and start your presentation.
Sounds good. And just as a quick FYI, a portion of this session will be recorded for everyone's benefit, for those that could attend in person as well as those, or at least virtually, and those could not. But we will also have an unrecorded portion of this conversation so that we can engage in an open dialogue. So I'll kick things off with this session that we've called Azure AD Voice of the Customer. Will actually feature two main components. One being a component where we'll walk through something we're calling the launch of our customer community for education, specific to identity. And then we'll also segue into something that we'll be going through some of the common identity challenges that we see and getting your live feedback, scenarios that you have, feedback, etc. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce myself really quickly and then hand it over to today's panel. So a little bit about me, Corey Lee, currently Zero Trust Architect for U.S. Education. And one of the major focuses for not just the identity conversation, but many of the conversations that we're having in education revolve around how we can improve protections, detections, and response around security capabilities and security areas of focus within the education context. As you might imagine, identity is a huge part of that. And at the core of many of the identity based solutions that you see within the Microsoft portfolio, you tend to hear about or include things like Active Directory, or maybe things like Azure Active Directory, ADFS, etc. However, there's a huge push to really better understand not just our customer insights from a security perspective, but also our customer insights regarding things that hook into the security conversation, things like identity. So with that, just wanted to set a little of the stage for today's conversation. Feel free to keep it open, but at this point, we'll go ahead and segue into our first presentation component here, where we'll talk a little bit about the launch of our customer community for education focused on identity. So Pramila and team, if you want to go ahead and transition over.
Yep. Ben from our team will share the deck. So I'll start off with a quick round of introductions. Hi, everybody. This is Pramila Padmanabhan. I'm part of Identity Product Group within the CXP division. And we are here to talk you all through a little bit of a new idea that we are planning to launch. And we'll garner interest from you all, hopefully, at the end of this conversation. And we'd like to see you guys sign up. So watch out for a link that we'll put on the chat. Ben, ready when you are? The deck? Perfect. All right. So customer communities is what we're here to talk to you all about today. We're going to cover a very high level agenda first. So Ben, if you could just go to the next slide. We're going to go through introductions. We'd love for you to meet the team. We'll tell you all what next steps are, and we'd love to take questions. In the meanwhile, if you'll have questions, we have a fair number of us on the call today, so feel free to put them on the chat. But first, before we even introduce the team, we thought it would be good to introduce what we are doing. Next slide. All right, Ben, do you want to kind of take tag team on this one?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. So we created the concept of this to really morph conversations that are coming from customers that make us of Microsoft, I guess, in a scattergun approach that delay or lengthen us solving problems for customers. So what we thought we use here is a more focused attempt to leverage communities. Either they may exist within particular customer verticals, and if they don't exist, we'd like to support and help creating and forming and supporting those communities where we can allow that community just to grow naturally and to give a very focused identity-centric view of the challenges they're having that we can listen to and also seek feedback from, and present ideas to, and give a peek into roadmap, and just help understand and have that two-way communication flow in a very targeted vertical manner.
Yeah, and so, to what Ben said, we've noticed that each vertical has nuanced problems, right? Problems within the education vertical is different from problems in the manufacturing vertical, and so on and so forth. So when we created this group of cohort of people who have the same sort of area of expertise, we realized that not only can Microsoft help them better, but also oftentimes each of them can help each other. So the benefit is to have a mutually beneficial engagement model where you'll tell us at a collective level what we can solve. Microsoft will obviously lean in and help, but also create a touch point for you guys to be able to talk to each other. And we wanted to have this forum where we can understand cross-sector requirements in a specific technology area. We want to be able to come show you our thinking ahead for the roadmap. Also get inputs from you guys if we are thinking in the right direction, if that's what your industry needs us to solve, and help get that prioritization insight earlier in the game. And we're not really looking for this to be a very heavyweight or high touch requirement from you. So time commitment is not going to be a whole lot. We're going to create a rather lightweight engagement model where we'll try and bring the community together maybe once a month, and we'll try and figure out whether this is post-COVID, of course, whether it'll be in person or it's going to be virtual. But we also wanted to create sort of a digital space for you guys to be invited and have a conversation. And so Yammer was an opportunity that we thought we'd explore. We have used this, some of you all might be aware of this program called Identity Advisors, which already leverages the Yammer network. And we're going to create an Yammer group dedicated for the education vertical, which will give you all a place to not necessarily only wait for that once in a month connect that we'll have, but you all can have those conversations offline. If you all have a question, you want to try and say, hey, how are you solving this in governance, or how are you doing this other thing in PIM, whatever. So you can use that forum to make it a place where everybody from the education vertical can come together, have conversations with each other. We'll try and check for NDA so that conversation stays there, as well as you all will respect Microsoft's roadmap conversations as well and keep it in-house. So it'll be a community of trusted folks who can help you and advise you with Microsoft's involvement. So time commitment wise, we're not expecting it to be very heavy for you guys. All right, with that, let's introduce you to our team. Ben? So first I'm going to talk to you about the team which is on the creation of the communities, right? Customer communities is going to have existence in many, many different verticals. Education vertical is one of the verticals. We could have this in, think of, government. It could be in healthcare. It could be in finance. We have several different verticals. But there's a core team of people who are creating these different communities. So I'm going to first introduce the customer communities, and then I'm going to introduce to you the domain experts for the education vertical in a minute. So once again, hi everybody, Pramila Padmanabhan. I'm part of the identity product group. So my focus area is in identity, and I'm part of the customer and partner division, and customer community is something new that we are launching, and I'm excited to partner with you guys at the pilot of this. Ben?
Yeah, hi everyone, Ben Wolf. I'm also a program manager in Identity CXP, but I'm based in Sydney, Australia.
Sophia?
Hey everyone, my name is Sophia Pandey. I'm also on the same team as Pramila and Ben in CXP, and I'll be focused on some of the different vertical communities that Pramila was highlighting earlier, and really excited to get you collaborating in those as well. As Pramila was mentioning earlier, there's another larger community that I'm also focused on right now called Identity Advisors, and being able to hear early on private preview feedback and other feedback as well. And so we're really looking to hear from your feedback and perspective, and looking to have a place for you to collaborate with each other and with us as well, and looking forward to it.
Great. Anne?
Hi, everybody. My name is Anne Kenzon. I'm from the Identity Collaborative Engineering Programs team, and I help run communities around identity.
Great, thank you so much. And I'd like to thank you. Shweta, can I invite you to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Shweta Rai. I'm also a program manager in the Identity CXP division, which is customer experience. And I'm looking forward to partnering with all of you.
Perfect. Ramiro?
Hello, everybody. I'm Romero Calderon. I'm a program manager in the Azure AD organization, same team as Pramila, Ben, Sweta, Sophia. And my role is focusing on enterprise architecture, and in the context of EDU is like architecture considerations and best practices around the EDU vertical. So thank you for having me today.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Chan. I'm a program manager in identity on the same team as everyone mentioned above, and have the same focus as Ramiro, focusing on the best practices in the EDU vertical. So look forward to this community, and hopefully it turns into a collaborative effort that benefits everyone.
Great. Hopefully we have gotten you all a little bit excited. James's comment on the chat is making me smile a little bit, and I'm going to come to James in a minute. But hopefully the vast majority of y'all are excited and you'll want to now know what next. You like that concept, you want to join the Yammer network, what do you want to do next? Next slide. Great. So Sophia has already set up the form for us. So we'll put this on the chat. Sophia, if you want to just put the chat, the link on the chat.
Yeah, perfect. Just share that now. And so would love if you're interested, if you can fill that out for us to get some key pieces we'll need from you for next steps. I would love to hear more from you.
Yeah, so this is just to collect interest. I wanted to call out the fact that this will go through a vetting process. We will need to check if your organization has an existing NDA with Microsoft, because this is a by invite community and we are looking to be able to share a little bit more strategic conversations here, if you will. We will be also sharing some of our roadmap pieces. So from that perspective, this is not what is going to be available, quote unquote, publicly, right? This is going to be a very strategic group of customers whom we are inviting in to sort of collaboratively engineer Microsoft's roadmap for the education space. And so we'd love for you all to indicate your interest. Any organization is welcome from any part of the globe. I had seen some questions in the past where they have to be based in certain geography. No, if you're in the education space and you're anywhere, we welcome you. However, we will go through and check if you have an existing NDA and other pieces which are in place. If not, then Sophia or Anne from our group may reach out to you and see if you want to complete that process. Once accepted, you will see a link or invitation to the Yammer group, and on the bottom of the screen you'll see right now how that Yammer group looks like. Ben, you want to chime in with anything more?
Yeah, I think you've covered it all. The only thing I'll add, once accepted into the Yammer network, just what we wanted to really do is, don't just join it and let it die on the vine. We really want to foster conversations. We want that rich communication flow. We want to be able to present, new and exciting and upcoming features to you, and also get that rich feedback from members of the group. So, just help us grow it, come up with ideas, reach out to us, and just keep the community active as we look to grow, because I think it's really beneficial in both ways.
Perfect. And so with that, we are now come to the segment which I'm most excited about, to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. I'd love to maybe invite James first, because he says that this has been going on for 20 years. Anybody else also with any questions, any thoughts, please feel free to come off mute and ask us some questions and tell us what you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this community, what's now called the Microsoft High Ed community, and before that it was Windows and Higher Ed, for 20 plus years now. So we've already been doing this as a community, and we've had to fight at times to keep Microsoft engaged.
Yeah,
So
I was going to add on to that since I'm one of the founders. This whole started out with Microsoft reaching out to a whole bunch of us about this newfangled thing they wanted us to use called Active Directory in Windows NT 5. And that's how long we've been going with this community. And as James said, it's been up and down. There have been times that Microsoft's really reached out to the education vertical with a lot of resources and a lot of focus. And there have been times when we've felt very much ignored by Microsoft. Amusingly, this sounds a lot like I'm trying to remember. I think it was when Windows 2008 was being developed. There was a big push. They called it the Personas effort, and a bunch of high eds got invited to that effort as well. And then that faded away. So again, and emphasizing that it seems to be a big focus for Microsoft, and then it wanes again, and we have to start poking, to feel like we're relevant.
Fair, and I want to first and foremost acknowledge and apologize for any of the historical ebbs and flows you may have felt, right? You are correct that typically that does happen. I don't know enough about the space from what happened 20 years ago to speak about it intelligently, but at the same time, I do want to acknowledge that might have been the experience, and we do deeply apologize for that. What we can say, what we're going to do something differently this way, this time around at least, hopefully, is, as you can notice, we are doing two things. One, we have focus from not just the periphery of Microsoft, the field and so on, but actually the product group itself. And we have dedication from two sides. One, to set up the communities, because Ben, me have a charter, Sophia have a charter to set up these communities first and foremost. Also, we are bringing in people like Romero, right, Shweta, who have going to take on this as an area of expertise from a charter perspective, and they're going to look at it deeply and look at how we can elevate the conversation to a strategic level and represent the needs of the community to the leadership team. That's one. And secondly, the piece that I do want to acknowledge also is the fact that we are going to create a space, a safe space, if you will, a pre-vetted space where the community can help each other. Because oftentimes what happens is, let's say you ask a question or you want some help or you want some sort of an input. The Microsoft person may not be available or around, and maybe there's a few hours which you have between what you want to ask and what you want. The response will come back to. The community, what we are hoping to do is activate the community to such an extent that this becomes a self-sustaining community where each of you can help each other. And I don't know if the previous programs had that element to it, but I feel like we're experimenting with that side of the house a little bit for the first time. And we're also looking to you guys to give us signals of what we can do. How can we make sure that this community does not die out? How do we make sure that from both sides, from our side as well as from your side, the engagement stays? From our side, what I will commit to you is that we will make sure that we have somebody from Microsoft side always available to you. We will have access to myself, Ben, Sophia, Shweta, Romero, all of us, along with Corey, who's actually been instrumental in bringing us here today. I actually didn't even have the bandwidth, and Corey advocated for this community as well as this cohort so much, and he said, please give us at least half an hour today because this community is really valuable, and I completely agreed, and so that's why we're here. So the product group is committed to making this happen for you from identity side. I'd love to hear from you what all y'all think we can do more. I see some hands up.
Yeah, Brian Arkhills is next.
Go for it.
Yeah, hi. Some of you know me pretty well. And I'm really glad to hear that you guys are doing this because I felt, particularly over the last probably 10 years, the burden of being the voice at the edu community to Microsoft, various Microsoft product teams. First as an MVP and now as part of the Identity Advisors program. So I'm glad to hear that you're broadening your engagement with this sector. If for nothing else, it relieves some of the burden that I have felt like I had to carry. Second thing, I think that this vertical does have a lot of unique things that aren't necessarily very common in other sectors. Just the way that we approach IT and the delegation needs that we have are very high. And so I think you're going to hear that as a very strong recurring theme as you talk with us. Third thing is that I think that there are a lot of cross-product issues that we run into. And, you know, I could probably list off several just off the top of my head, but just to pick on one of my favorites right now, groups. You know, you've got multiple, we have heard for many years about how Microsoft is changing engineering in the company to not be sort of siloed, but the reality is that it seems to still be siloed, and each of your product teams is implementing their own version of groups because the Azure AD groups that are provided are insufficient for their needs. And as customers, we end up kind of having to deal with that dysfunction within Microsoft. And so, anyhow, that's just one concrete example. One of the fears that I have is that as we engage, we're going to run into the wall between product teams. And so maybe you have a comment or a response to that, but that is one of the fears I have.
So I will take a stab at it, Brian, and I'll invite Ben, you know, Ramiro, everybody else to chime in as well. I'll say my 2 cents, but I'm sure everybody else has some more inputs as well. So first and foremost, yes, there have been situations. I want to acknowledge what you're saying, Brian. All of us over here are from the identity product group, so the Azure AD side of the house. And you are right that, for example, groups, there are 8 different groups or teams that have different groups, right? But this is a problem that we have acknowledged within Microsoft, and in the form that we have put out on the chat, Sophia's link, if you see, we're asking for you to tell us what topics you would like us to bring to the first discussion. So for example, if you were to bring groups, what we'll do is, because this will be a vetted community, we will bring the leader of the groups, for example, and we'll have him talk through how we're looking to unify all those groups. I don't say that we are necessarily going to be able to bring the whole company's weight, because all of us are from identity, but we are definitely making a much more concerted effort to make this a seamless experience for you. There may be times when you give us feedback or inputs or asks which are adjunct to identity, and so you may have something which you need with Intune, or you may have something that you need with Defender. We will at least be the conduit and get that message across the line. We're not going to just, you know, show you a wall and say, this is not us, go talk to somebody else. We'll definitely try and connect the dots for you so that you get that connected experience. But I acknowledge that this is an area of growth for us, and we look for you to continue giving us signals of what we can do more of. I saw Jeevan's, I think, hand went up, but I know Ben, Ramiro, whoever wants to chime in.
Whoever's talking is not connected to their right microphone. No, we can't hear you. It's Jivan. Oh, no.
Okay. So first of all, as Pramila said, we acknowledge that, yes, this is the problem. So can you hear me now or no?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we acknowledge that this is the problem, and we are trying to gather all these inputs even on ourselves. What are the different types we have? What are different gaps we see? But from the customer side, we would like to understand your scenarios and what you are trying to achieve and what is your business objective. So that technical work we can actually line up and make an ask to other teams, particularly to coordinate and get those things done. But I think from the customer perspective, you can tell us better like what you really need. and Ramiro and Corey and others, feel free to chime in as needed. But I have heard this from other customers too. And the PM side, we know it's like, okay, this is the gap. So we have already started collecting this information together.
Yeah, I can highlight at least, this is Corey speaking, at least over the last year or so, there's been a tremendous amount of work put into really understanding what we at least call the top identity challenges from an education lens. And Brian and as several others have pointed out, the potential scenario where maybe your voice wasn't necessarily fully being heard, and those scenarios weren't necessarily maybe being tracked or understood, and subsequently turned into technology, if you will, that could meet your needs. So that's definitely something that, at least from my perspective, I know the greater team's perspective, that we're focused on doing better this time around. And more importantly, that we're starting with your context, at least your context from an education perspective in regards to how we prioritize, not just education specific, maybe identity features, but also how we understand how those features and capabilities will drive education outcomes. So
next up is James Morris with his hand raised. James, you're muted.
Helps to I was just going to ask, is this intended to be focused on higher ed, or is this Microsoft's definition of education, which includes K-12? Because K-12 and higher ed are completely different verticals.
So that's a great question.
I can say definitively that our plan is to address both, but ensure that we have the context of both based on the narratives and the use cases / scenarios that are specific to both. Just as a higher level answer there.
The next up is Phil Swansea.
Yes, thanks, Steve. Sorry, James stole my thunder a little bit there with that, and all I would say is my recommendation for this to be successful is definitely track higher ed separately than K through 12, because you will see, while we do have some slight overlap, there are a lot, the needs start to really skew around identity and technology, where higher ed's needs are going to be way different than K through 12, and you're going to see that start to branch off. And we just want to make sure that that's where we used to get lost, right? And I think that echoes James's point. And again, I would love to see this be successful, but I think that's always been our problem. We get lost in the K through 12 community.
I get you. And so, Phil, this is where we'd love to tap into your collective knowledge. So the slide, I don't know, Ben, if you can bring up that slide again, but we're going to not only have people like myself, Ben, Sophia, and who set up the communities, we're also looking to add more muscle in terms of domain expertise. And so Romero, Shweta, Tyler, Corey, and people are going to be very interested and invested to see and learn from you what are the specific needs for your vertical. And if there is a need for us to have sort of a subgrouping underneath that and have a focused area conversation for K through 12, then for higher ed, then we're happy to do that, because you're right. Having been in the industry, I used to manage Microsoft Learn prior to joining Identity, incidentally. So I'm fully aware and familiar with the problem of how the learning needs as well as the identity needs in these spaces are completely different. And I understand and recognize what you're saying, and we'd love to learn from the collective here how to distill that. So maybe as part of the kickoff conversation, we'll look to see whether we need to form maybe subgroups or have some tags created in the Yammer network where we tag it as this is a K-12 topic, whether this is a higher ed topic. And these are the kind of ideas I'm looking for you all to help us make this program successful, because the program is going to be as successful as all of you all leaning in. Microsoft is obviously going to do its part. We are very, very invested to make sure that this is a success this time around, but you collectively have over, it's been around for 20 years, and even if 5 of you all have been involved in this for 20 years, that's 100 years of experience. Ben and myself don't have that kind of experience in setting this up, neither do Ramiro or Shweta. So we'd love to get the collective audience here to give us some inputs on to what we should do differently. I know we're out of time, and I don't want to spend others' time on this.
No, yeah, I think we're engaging in a good conversation here, Pramila, and kind of on the heels of launching the community. I think it's important that some of these comments, we kind of capture the true essence of them, right? So, as we look to improve what has happened in the past, and we look to extend things like the current listserv that's being used to kind of really organically share a lot of insight and information amongst the higher education community today, kind of organically about how to solve certain technology related challenges related to Microsoft technology. So, I think as we take several of these nuggets, one of our objectives will be make sure that we're organizing the community in the appropriate way, make sure that we're capturing the scenarios and the use cases in a meaningful way, and that we're able to articulate progress as well as execution of let's just say technical activities and roadmap items to the appropriate audience at the appropriate time.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you, Corey. And I'd like to just once again underscore, Sophia has put the link in the chat. If you are interested in this effort, this is something that we are building ground up, so you have the opportunity to help us shape how it is. Please do indicate your interest and we'll take it from there. Ben, Ramiro, Shweta, Sophia, any last thoughts?
Oh, sorry. This is Romero here. Please go ahead. I'm not sure who was talking before me.
Yeah, it was just Ben. I was just going to say, I think you've covered it well, Pramila. We'd love to just, everyone sign up that has interest. And the one question I had was, Brian, as a very active member of Identity Advisors, how do you see just an extension of this participating in Yammer in a separate network? I'd love your quick thoughts on that. Do you think that has legs to it? And allow you to take those right conversations, I guess, out of Identity Advisors, but focus with that education lens on it for you?
I think probably some of the topics I start myself. Probably I would start in this other community.
Okay.
I think a lot of the conversations that go into Identity Advisors are more about the products and gaps that are broadly seen, and so I'll chime in on those. I think for the broader community, one of the challenges is going to be, when do we bring something in this Yammer group versus the existing mailing list?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Brian. I would say that if it is anything that's really focused just on EDU and anything that you feel may have the collaboration and the aspect with that lens, to be able to bring to this community first and to be able to share amongst others. And then we can always look to bubble it up to Identity Advisors, but we're really looking to members like yourself who are really engaged to have this conversation in the vertical space and be able to go into some of that conversation as well.
And I'd also mention that you guys should also rely heavily on Ken Hoover. Ken has a lot of historical knowledge, and I think a lot of us trust his experiences, and he works there at Microsoft now.
He's one of the CSAs in Azure on the education stew, for those that don't know.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely look into that.
Steve, Corey, can you connect me? And
without a doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one thing I'll call out here as well, that Brian, the kind of the beauty of where things are going is, historically we've had a lot of, let's just say, internal knowledge of the education vertical across different aspects of the business, whether, like was stated earlier, some out in the field doing actual deployment where folks like myself came from, et cetera. some that, came directly from maybe an institution or a K-12 district, others that maybe are working in engineering or other aspects of the business. So one of the main objectives is to be able to, at least in the context of being able to make sure that the identity efforts that underpin a lot of the major changes that happen to things like Teams or to things like the security capabilities or other solutions tend to ride off of a lot of the Azure AD changes. So we're very confident that like being able to harness the collective knowledge across the Microsoft ecosystem, connect the dots across those different individuals, resources that have education expertise, while also connecting directly with the customers and capturing those core scenarios and use cases that will be able to streamline more of the, let's just say, education-centric feature and product development, as well as making sure that we can do so in a timely and an impactful manner. So.
Absolutely. I know Romero was trying to say something. I know we are over time, but I'd love to give the floor to Romero for a minute.
Yep.
Oh no, just reiterating that what Pramila, Corey, and Ben have indicated. We are trying to get better at having a more holistic view of the space that help us to create a better understanding of the space, and having this forum is definitely going to be very helpful to get that holistic view of the problem space and to really partner with you in different needs, right? Sometimes the needs are not necessarily new features, but it can be sometimes it's guidance, sometimes it's reference architecture, things like that. And this is definitely what Tyler and I are kind of more focused on lately, but we don't know what we don't know. So I appreciate this space. I look forward to have as many sign-ups as we can to get our collective IQ higher and learn together.
All right. I know Steve and Corey, we have gone over, so I'll use from you.
Yeah, no worries, and hopefully you'll stick around, and I'll actually I'll poll the audience here for a second. If we shift into a conversation here to kind of talk about some of the things that we've noted as challenges and where we'd want to get your feedback on, and with regards to some of the identity features, if you're okay with this being a recorded portion of the session, or if we should stop the recording and really have an open discussion on this front. If you and feel free to either put a thumbs up. We'll just say if you're okay with keeping the recording going, maybe you can throw a thumbs up there. If you're not okay, maybe you can just we'll just see if we can gauge there. Okay. All right, so we're seeing some thumbs up rolling in. So we'll keep the recording going, and I'll start off by saying one big area of focus that we want to be able to improve is being able to determine how impactful a potential feature or feature request may be to the education vertical, and specifically I'll speak to higher education in this context. But so as we start to talk about things like, as an example, if we need to prioritize a feature or really double down on moving in a certain direction for a capability, how this community will be used to help, once again, determine not only how impactful maybe a certain feature or capability will be to the education community at large, but also to ensure that it's being developed with the right context and so forth. So I just want to re-echo the fact that there's a lot of merit in joining this community, not just, once again, to share ideas and so forth, but to help with prioritization of features and capabilities that specifically map to the education vertical. So with that being said, I'll leave this particular slide up, and feel free to come off of mute and share. But one of the top questions that gets asked are, Well, we know that there are some things that we see across education all up, and then we know that there are some things that we see across higher education. As we start to talk about some of the things that we see in higher ed specifically, I just want to note the fact that as we've been engaged in conversations over the past in regards to things like identity standards in education and what does it mean to support things like multilateral federation and in common integration, things like EduGain participation and some of the things that power those types of let's just say requirements in the education space. This is where we're looking to gain a better understanding, not just of the identity standards, but also of those core feature sets that really are required. And as we look to evolve the way in which some, let's just say, capabilities behave, but also how some use cases are achieved just based on the modernization of technology, we want to ensure that once again, we're making the right decisions in context. So, this slide just kind of shows some of the things that we're tracking right now. By no means is it exhaustive, but as we start to see, a combination of things like higher education environments, whether we're talking higher education universities, standalone, or university systems, or as we're looking at things like, universities, but that also have academic medical centers and what we call university, academic research medical, research centers or UARCs or FFRDCs, federally funded, research and development centers. We know that there's different skins of higher education, or at least different quote unquote micro audiences within higher ed. So we want to be able to parse through that, but also get to where some of those micro needs might be as we talk about universities and education customers that actually have multiple personas and multiple audiences that the solutions and capabilities have to be, in some cases, purpose built for. So I won't extend that out any longer, but maybe there's an opportunity for some to come off mute and maybe highlight, like if you had to take some of these off of this list and maybe rank them, or talk about your top 3 challenges, whether it be on this list or off this list. Feel free to come off mute now or drop in the chat. We'd love to hear from you directly.
I think I just wanted to make a comment, and I think I can speak for most people on this list that to your last point, I think that it's difficult for us because the answer very much is dependent on who the question is asked of. For example, like we often are in a position where we have very complex environments where we're kind of being increasingly forced into a hybrid environment because a fully native one, say in the cloud, isn't feasible. Like there's no feature parity. So now we're architecting these hybrid environments, but then we're running into a whole host of challenges there. And so will we prefer native solutions? Absolutely. But you have so much work to do on your end to get things to a point where we can do that. And then in hybrid scenarios, there's of course, the challenges that we've already mentioned or spoke of, where we're forced to leverage, legacy technologies, and the progression of technology forces us to start moving in a certain direction. For example, like personally, the behemoth that is my university was very slow to adopt some of, the more modern technologies. Just getting hybrid join configured wasn't really a decision that had much foreplanning, even though there was much need for it. What ultimately forced our hand was the way licensing for Office changed, for example. And so, we had this hackish solution for the licensing where it was DBA, and then DBS got introduced to supersede it. And now all of a sudden our devices had to be, registered or hybrid joined. And so that, makes it very difficult for us to prioritize because my interests are going to be very different from, say, IAM's interests, which is going to be different from security's interests, in terms of prioritizing some of these efforts.
No, that's great feedback, and I appreciate that, Keith. And I'll just actually, you were pretty verbose in describing that, so I won't add anything to it. And I see some lists coming into the chat here. Feel free, Mark, or if I noticed the confidential attributes piece, as we've heard over and over again in some cases, that whether you're not syncing your attributes to Azure AD or you're having to go out to an external attribute or claim store for things like SSO or multilateral federation, just feel free to chime in. Like where do you see confidential attributes being a blocker? And because it's showing up at the top of the list, would you consider it to be maybe number one? Okay, and I see a few chiming in. Mark, did you were you okay with coming off of mute and maybe leading the charge here regarding where confidential attributes plays just some of the scenario behind confidential attributes and why it may be considered or perceived like the number one blocker?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just a general kind of conversation that always comes up about, oh yeah, we want to do this thing or that thing, and the question always comes up, well, is that allowed by FERPA, right? Is this can we put this attribute in there related to, say, a class that someone's taking, or some other attribute of a student that we wouldn't necessarily want everybody to be able to see in the Azure AD. So.
Okay, so just parsing that a little bit. So concerns around FERPA compliance and whether or not an attribute needs to maintain its privacy state, and or some type of requirement from maybe the school or the university directly around whether or not that attribute is needs to maintain protection or not make it to the directory.
Yeah, and I think that at our university, Azure is one of those things that's come in because kind of what Keith mentioned, how we need to do hybrid join for the licensing, or we need to do this for that. Azure is never really kind of the first choice for a lot of like the application side stuff at all. They're much more likely to use shibboleth and CAS and stuff like that. And I see the value that it could bring to us, but when the discussion is, well, how do we protect that data? And my answer is, well, we can't protect that data, so then we can't put the data in there. So then, all right, well, that discussion's over then. So.
Gotcha. And you mentioned something that I kind of want to throw out there once again, because we don't want to overlook certain things, and one thing that historically we may say has been overlooked is just some of the ways in which shibboleth is being used within an environment, and some of the scenarios where applications still may be leveraging things like CAS as for authentication in the environment. So I'll throw it out there that feel free, if you want to come off of mute, to also talk about some of those reasons for why Azure may not be the first choice, or maybe an afterthought when it comes to application integration, etc. It looks like Philip has his hand up there. So.
Yeah. Yes. I wanted to just expand on that too, from our standpoint, since we've just recently embraced Azure Web SSO holistically at our university. One of the biggest things we've had to back away from is any attribute that, and again, might make higher ed different, is every institution's security officer that basically and controls that they put in place for FERPA and what's allowed to be presented is different at every institution, because basically it's interpretation of information that's provided, and it's basically who's in charge and who says what is allowed and who isn't. So you can't just say, oh, well, these 5 will protect, these 5 we can't. It's almost like we need the freedom to protect what we're required to protect by what our institution deems is protected at that time. So it really complicates our ability to just tell you, hey, these 5 attributes just protect. I think the other problem we had when we were rolling out is we found out like certain attributes that we have in our shibboleth installation. This is why we really don't think Azure when we think WebSSO, and it was very hard for us to adjust to that. Was, well, shibboleth gives us the freedom to do that and protect attributes back in LDAP. So only certain web apps can get those attributes based on security exceptions. And Azure, there is no such thing. So basically, it's a generic use space. It's okay. Well, this is all you get, and you can't get any more. If you want more, you have to go to another product.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the why is Azure not always thought about first, is because it's like literally, well, I want more of that flexibility with all of the attributes we know the university uses, which we have a ton of things like fine-grained affiliations that we can't really release to the public and let everybody know that everybody's a member of these certain groups. And it's the same even with students, courses, or information pertaining to their course list. You can't really let that out there. But some applications, it would be nice where applications were written around and tailored to a student based on that information, but we can't put that in Azure because it's too easily discoverable.
That's great context, and I know, Jeevan, I know some questions have been asked in the chat here today, but I'll just kind of recap. To me, that those statements sound less like there's a desire to just purely avoid Azure AD, and more of a desire to have the flexibility that you need from a customization perspective, whether it be with things like attribute release or attribute masking, aka confidential attributes, and that concept of customization in the context of the business needs or the requirements that exist at the institution. Okay. Philip looks like he has his hand up as well.
Yeah, I just figured I would tag on to the end of that. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. In higher ed, we've been using these Microsoft technologies, Active Directory and Windows Server, for so many years, and we've been able to tailor them pretty much to do, for the most part, whatever we want to do or whatever is being required of us. And then moving into this cloud realm is very different, because there's a lot of things, and Azure AD is the perfect example where we don't have that ability to customize. We're basically putting data in, and that's about it. We do want to use them, and I'm not necessarily saying that we need to be able to customize everything the way we can in Active Directory, but there needs to be some control, or at least the conversation, which I think this is good that we're starting, on how higher eds need those things to be.
Great point. And once again, I'll echo that, a lot of these items are not exhaustive, right? We know there's a lot more underneath the hood once you pull back, identity in an education environment. But, I would say, from what I've heard thus far, being able to support those restricted attribute scenarios core to driving not just student outcomes, but also ensuring that developers and business owners can make decisions in regards to using Azure Active Directory as the directory of choice and the integration point of choice for SSO, application integration, federation, etc. I've also heard that, the dual persona conversation, being able to manage, individuals moving between roles, or students that maybe become faculty members or researchers, or transition between different types of, we won't call it persona, but more, classes of a user. And then lastly, I think the delegated administration piece came up, obviously several times during this week, but also over the past year plus, in regards to just the need to be able to handle delegation across business units or schools at a university, just based on current practices. So I know we have a few minutes here left, but the idea would be that, with this community launching, please go and join this community, and become an active member and/or a member that at least can consume information. As was mentioned earlier, one of the main objectives is not just to listen, but to also be able to inform engineering decisions, to be able to ask more insightful questions specific to education, and to also be able to track use cases and scenarios and impact to the education vertical. So I'll end there, Steve, in case we've got a few more minutes and we want to, any more questions coming in or thoughts? I see a licensing question. I was tempted to avoid that one.
And I'm going to make a statement on the licensing question. I understand people can be faculty, they can be staff, they can be students, they can be all three at one time. The fact that we have a student use benefit so that students don't have to pay when your faculty and or staff are paid, how would you like us to designate when a person is supposed to have a student use benefit and when they're not, if we're not calling that, for faculty or for students? Or do you just want us to charge you for everybody? And I joke about that last one.
Well, no, that's a great question. And if we can, I'd love for someone, on the call to maybe jump in regarding like what we've heard. Well, we don't want the licenses to have things like student in them. We've heard that licensing is too broad or not as, let's just say as narrow. I'd love to know from an education perspective, just your general thoughts in regards to what might work from an education perspective when it comes to licensing.
And I just put a link to the survey in there. If you can fill out the survey for this session, that would be awesome. And at this point, I am going to stop the recording because we do have another session starting in less than a minute.